You're watching the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm, endorsed by the Hello Deli.
Yeah.
La, la, la.
Welcome once again to the Letterman podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. Really excited about this guest, Wally Feresten. Wally Feresten has been in the epicenter of New York show business for 34, 35 years. He has worked at 30 Rock, got hired in 1990 by a guy by the name of Tony Mendez, Tony Inky Mendes. And Wally, I don't know if there's a more influential person in the cue card business than Wally at this point. If there is, if you ever watch Late Night with Seth Myers, Wally is featured as he's a character. He's a device that Seth Myers uses. See, this is the thing about late night. There's so many people right now that like to kind of throw stones at the current late night offerings and because, you know, thinking about yesteryear, especially with Letterman, or maybe that's just the echo chamber I live in. I don't know. But that being said, there's a lot of folks who think, oh, Late Night with Seth Myers really isn't late night. It's not the franchise that Dave built. Well, there are elements that have survived. One of those elements being Seth utilizes folks in the production of that show as on-camera talent. You know, you think of the writers that he brings on, jokes that Seth can't tell, that segment, which is, in my opinion, a really fresh, great segment that talks about where our culture is right now, and other crew members as well. Wally, the cue card guy, has been on Seth many times, and Seth and he have a really nice rapport. That relationship was built over the years because Wally, basically, when Tony Mendez hired him, while he was at Saturday Night Live, Tony went over to Late Show when Dave left, and Wally ascended and was working Saturday Night Live and was working Conan and all of these other places, and has a crew of folks, and in 04 actually started a cue card company and does all of these shows. And in fact, when Tony Mendez left Late Show, and Todd took over, that's one of Wally's employees. You know, it's a very interesting story, and Wally goes into all of it. Now, that being said, I'm going to grab some cue cards. Wally actually has a cue card company. Very, very smart how he did it. cuecardsbywally.com. Go to cuecardsbywally.com and he will customize a cue card and send it to you. So this is a cue card from Dave. He immediately, when he saw it, recognized it being a joke, one of Tony's. And you know, if you ever wanted one of the you know, probably the foremost cue card person of all time to write a joke, to write something for you, for a friend to put it up on the wall, that sort of a thing, go to cuecardsbywally.com. Super, super cool. We're going to get to the episode right now because it is way better than me just talking. The Letterman podcast has one sponsor only, and that is hello-deli.com. Go to hello-deli.com if you want to purchase Late Show with David Letterman official merchandise. Yeah, that's it. Please enjoy the Letterman podcast featuring Wally Feresten. Okay, Wally Feresten, I'm really, really excited to talk to you today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your insane schedule to come on to the Letterman podcast. I know this is your last day off. You're going back to work. Where are you going back to? Is that Seth that you're going back to work, or where?
No, we had a week off from Seth. This is our first week off since we came back from the strike.
Yep.
So since October 2nd. So this is our first week. I had a week off from Seth. I go back to SNL tomorrow.
Yep.
With the lovely Emma Stone hosting for the third or fourth time, maybe.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. We get along great. She's a pro. I'll have an easy week. I'll definitely have
I
an
like
easy
hearing that.
It's
I can't wait to unpack a whole pile of this here.
Yeah.
We're going to get to Letterman stuff, everybody. Don't worry. We're going to get to Letterman stuff. But at the end of the day, Wally, I just love the fact that I get to pick your brain about stuff. It is not going to be the only time I ask you here because I'm a huge Saturday Night Live fan, as well as, of course, all the late night stuff from when it was just Carson and Letterman all the way to when it mushroom clouded and the late shift and all of that happened. It seems that you've been kind of at the epicenter of all of these things. I'm going to start with an SNL Letterman question. Letterman's never been on SNL. Of course, there's the Paul Schaefer connection and whatnot. Yet the two orbits of these two powerhouse franchises seem to be linked up. I mean, there's the Jim Downey connection and other connections too. But do you find that as well, being in the epicenter of it, a lot of SNL people also are also Letterman people?
Yeah, my brother was one of those.
Of course, yeah.
He wrote for both shows, but Letterman was why he got into the business in the first place. But we won't talk. You're going to get him on later, so I'll let him tell his story. But yeah, no, without a doubt, especially being in the same building, 2 floors apart. And that's when, when I started and stuff. And it was just that, I think Will Forte was a writer on Letterman too, right? And then he went to SNL, tons of connections. And I know when in the back in the day, when Farley and Sandler, that's when I started on SNL. If Dave didn't have a needing the guest, they could just call up and somebody from SNL would come down. They used to do that. Conan did that as well. So you take advantage of people in the building. Seth still does it to this day. Late Night with Seth Myers. If a guest cancels or something happens, he'll get one of the news people in the building or SNL, somebody like that. Or I filled in once even as a guest too. So that was fun. So yes, it's all in the building, and I've been around it since 1990. So I've seen a lot. I don't remember everything, but it's been a lot. Yeah.
How could you remember everything? Because everything is like you're not exaggerating. Everything is big in your world there. Let me ask you this. Every time I go to New York, there is an energy around certain places in New York. I mean, the whole city has an energy to it, but 30 Rock certainly has it. And there are so many people who are just absolutely blown away by that place. You've been there for, 30 years. Does it still have majesty for you, or is it just The Office?
Okay, 30 going on 34. And it is. It's the weird thing. I get to brag that I've been there that long, but because I run New York City Cue Cards, I have my own company. I'm a vendor for these shows. I have free office space there. I have under the bleachers in 8H. That's my area. I keep my supplies there. All my, that's where we do the work for SNL. We do the work for Seth, and then and Jimmy's downstairs. That's where Letterman used to be downstairs. But I basically have rent-free office space in the most expensive office building in the world, maybe, and for so long. I should probably stop saying it because they might start thinking about charging me for it. But
I don't think so. With the, and it's so cool that this part of your career, I know show business is something that you wanted to get into, and it was such a cool thing you got into it, and how it's evolved for you over the years is just astounding. Seth using you on camera as much as he is, and you are a character in the show, and the cool thing that I love about it is you have history with the original. Oh, there's only a couple people. I think it's just you and Jay Johnson. I think you're the only two people that are currently with Late Night, that franchise that David Letterman started, and you have roots in the original franchise of it, using these support players as characters in the show. The current incarnation of Seth Myers, many people don't think it has a link, but that is a link right there to the original franchise. And you're one of those guys. Did you ever think you would be one of those guys, like the Chris Elliott's of the world, or the Jerry Mulligans, or whatever?
No, I watched the show in college. I went to Syracuse, and we used to watch every night. We'd get stoned, and after we did all our work, and we watched the show. And no, none of my wildest dreams. I mean, that I think I would be not even the character, just working on the show was beyond my wildest dreams. My brother was just starting out there as a writer, worked his way up, writing jokes at SNL, and he got hired. And no, not in my wildest dreams. I was an actor in high school, but I always wanted to write. Writing was the thing. I knew acting was, you can be the best actor in the world, but you're never going to get discovered, So I never aspired to it. I like doing it. I like being on camera, but this is the greatest thing. I'm getting all these parts, and I'm doing all these parts I've been on SNL, I've been on 30 Rock, I've been on, on all these shows, and now I'm on set so much. I'm in SAG-AFTRA, and I'm 1 year away from a pension, and I never have to audition for it. The writers just write me into it, and it's the greatest thing in the world. And that Seth trusts me to do these parts. Without, I see the script, I see my part maybe 2 hours before the show, while I'm writing a closer look, or while I'm writing the SketchUp. So I have no time to prepare, little time, and that he trusts me to do a good job, and that he keeps on trusting me is, puts me over the moon. But no, never in my wildest dreams that I think I would be a character on the show. Never.
It's so great. And I think a lot of folks, you know, a lot of folks, and they do this with everything. You know, they did it with Letterman and Leno. Oh yeah, but it wasn't like Carson or Parr or Cabot and all that. People do the same thing with the current crop of late night. They think about the yesteryear, and I think a lot of people throw the baby out with the bathwater when they think a lot of these franchises don't have some of that magic. That is a key ingredient. The way that Seth uses his writers and brings them out and use them in bits that are fresh. You know, jokes Seth can't tell, things like that. Using you and other devices like that, it's such a great thing to see. The way that I want to start this thing asking, you know, you've got Colbert and these other guys that are now using teleprompters and whatnot. A lot of folks talk about, oh, the cue cards are still a thing. You know, that's not just a forgotten, you know, heirloom to this thing. There's a lot of work that your company is doing.
Yes, we were like, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, I was busier than I've ever been. I was doing Conan on the West Coast with guys out there. And I had, you know, the Tonight Show with Jimmy, and I had Seth, and I had SNL, and we were doing Amber's show on Peacock. That was on Fridays. And so much more. I was doing stuff in Florida. I was doing New Year's Eve shows. I was doing, you know, parades. It was crazy. The main thing is a lot of the offshoots for late night in the Tonight Show, they worked at Saturday Night Live, and they grew up on cue cards. They didn't have teleprompter. We didn't have teleprompter. It was all cue cards. So that's what they feel comfortable with. Conan was like that. And it's just, and I think they realized when they got their own shows, it's somebody to play off of. Seth certainly did. Dave did as well. Dave, you know, with Dave and Tony, and Dave early on with Kevin K. And I don't know, do you remember TC Laughlin? I don't know if she was on camera a lot or not, but she was between Kevin and Tony, I believe. I worked with her on SNL. So yeah, they have this history of doing that in Conan as well. So yeah, it's just what they know, they're comfortable with it. And it's a fun thing for the audience to watch as well. It's part of the show, kind of.
If you listen to Strike Force 5, and I hope everyone who watches or listens to this show has, because it is certainly a better show than this one. Wally gets a mention. I forget. I think it's in episode 5. I think where Seth talks about you and cue cards come up, and Seth, you know, makes some great jokes about you and whatnot. But then Jimmy Fallon tells a story about when he was hosting. It was at the Emmys, and the teleprompter went down. And now what?
Well, so
you know.
So I remember now. See, I remember this. I was watching in my home. I was watching because Jimmy, I'm a fan of Jimmy. I'm a friend of Jimmy's.
Sure.
And I was like, I'm watching this, and my wife's sitting next to me, and we see him come out and see him freeze and say the teleprompter's out, and it's for 15 seconds, which is an eternity when it's the first thing you're supposed to be saying. And it's just, and I see that how uncomfortable it is, and he doesn't know what to do. And I turn to my wife and I go, my company has just been solidified for the next 10 years, because Lorne Michaels was in the audience for that. And it was a this is why we use cue cards. This is why we don't use prompter for live shows like this. That's why. And I was like, well, honey, we're set. Go buy a sports car, honey. We're good for the next 10 years.
I want to go back to how it began. Because people may not make the connection immediately that you actually do have quite a few ties to Letterman. You started working for Tony Mendez.
I did. Yeah, Tony and Kevin.
How did that all transpire?
So I was in California. I went to Syracuse for writing, and I wanted to write. So I moved to LA after 4 years in the cold Syracuse weather. I didn't get any real leads out there. So the girl I was dating was from Boston. She wanted to live closer. So I said, well, we can go to New York. And she's like, all right, let's go to New York. So we moved to New York, and I was looking for work. I couldn't find work. I had a job. I didn't. I was working at a golf course. I think that was later, but I was trying to find work. And my brother was looking for, people that were hiring. He's keeping his ear open at SNL and Letterman and stuff. And I get a job as a bike messenger. I didn't have a bike now, mind you. Okay. And I don't know New York City at all, but I just need to work. So I called him up and I said, hey, Spike, can I borrow your mountain bike? He's like, yeah, why? I go, I just got a job as a bike messenger. I need to, use it. He's like, yeah, sure. Come on over. And as I hang up and I'm heading to his apartment, I was on the east side. He's on the west side. He calls my mother and says, you've got to call Wally and tell him, make him not take that job because he's going to get killed. I didn't know the city, but he's playing a good guy. Yeah, come over and get my bike. So I came over and got his bike. Rode the bike home. I get home and my girlfriend said, oh, your mom wants you to call her. And she wouldn't let me off the phone, crying in tears. You can't take that job. You're gonna get killed. Your brother told. So he ratted me out to my mom, and I think he might have felt guilty. And like a few weeks later, I got hired at a golf course. But then he said, "Hey, they're looking for a cue card guy to hire." And I said, "Great. Did you recommend me?" And he was like, "No." He's like, "I know your handwriting is terrible." And I was like, "Let them tell me that my handwriting's terrible." He's like, "All right, fine." So he brought me in and got me the interview. And the interview basically is printing up cards. You know, you go in there and you write cards up. And I wrote about 10 cards, and it was bad. But I think because Spike was my brother, they said, "Well, we've seen worse. Let's give you a shot." And they hired me.
Did you do the interview with Tony?
Yeah, Tony and Kevin were both there.
Yeah.
And I was basically, they give you pens, they give you some instruction, and then they let you, fill it out and print some cards. And they said they'd seen worse. I think they were being nice. Yeah, they hired me, and I should have been fired. Tony wanted to fire me.
He did early
My
on.
handwriting was terrible. Tony was a stickler. Tony, he ran a tight ship. In that SNL show, you had to run a tight ship, or things didn't get done.
Yep.
So my printing was not great, and he was embarrassed by it. Like if he saw printing that goes out to the floor, even if he's not holding it, and he sees it, he's embarrassed by it because he's representing this. He's the department head.
Yep.
So I think he wanted me to screw up so he could fire me. So the first show, I held 6 cards, and I'll never forget. It was for Sprocket's sketch. It was Kyle MacLachlan was the host, and and Mike Myers was doing a Sprocket sketch.
Yep.
And it was the first 6 cards of the sketch, and I was the only one holding it. Nobody else was. Now, if in today's world, if I hire somebody, I would never give them the first 6 cards of a sketch with nobody else holding it. Never in my life. So he did that. Kevin stood behind me. I held the cards. I did it perfectly. I went backstage. Kevin was right there. Kevin was like, "I've never seen anything like that before." I go, "What? What are you?" He was like, "Your entire body was shaking, yet you held those cards perfectly still, and you held them perfectly." And then the next week, he gave me 3 sketches. This was another thing. I was on a ladder. I think I was lying on my stomach, and they were heavy sketches, like 40, 50 cards. And I did them perfectly. And I think that's where it rang in his head that, oh, he can hold really well. He could be an asset in holding. Maybe his printing's not so great. We'll work on that, but he can really help on the floor. And that's a big deal with cue card holding. Timing. For some reason, I took to it. Whether it was the athletics that I did as a kid, it was a hand-eye coordination, whatever it was, I just took to it. I loved it. It didn't bother me. I wasn't nervous, and I did it well. And I ended up being an asset, and it saved my job. And I've been there 33 years because of that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So at that point, like you've got your own company now. And what's your company?
New York City Cue Cards.
New York City Cue Cards.
We started in 2004.
In 04, you started that. Okay. That's what I was going to ask. So back then, you're all employees of NBC at that point, right?
No, we're employees of a company called Video Q, and Kevin K's uncle owned it in California. They ran the Tonight Show in California, and they had Letterman and SNL in New York. And Kevin was just starting out at Nickelodeon as an executive, but was or maybe a few years after I started, but then was still working on Saturdays and keeping an eye on things for his uncle on the East Coast. So I was basically working for Kevin.
That's a guy I sure want to talk to. Boy, talk about a success story in the entertainment business.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
oh my goodness.
Sure.
Where he came from to where he's gone and whatnot. And I love that so many of you have those stories. Your brother has it as well. And just the different evolutions of things. We talked about yours a little bit earlier. We're going to talk about it more. So is it a union thing? Are you guys union?
No, I'm a vendor. I'm considered a vendor.
Okay. So, you kind of fall through the cracks of some of the, I don't know what you want to call it, the politics or the bureaucracy or the system that is set up within the entertainment business. You guys kind of fall through the cracks a little bit, but are, again, as we said earlier, at the epicenter of it. So Tony and Kevin worked for this company. What was some of the first lessons that Tony and Kevin gave to you to say, okay, this is what makes an effective cue card person? And are those still the laws to this day? Is it something that it hasn't evolved very much when it comes, or has it changed?
There's been a few changes, but ultimately Tony, because I said he ran such a tight ship and a rigid ship, Tony, to my knowledge, came up with most of the rules we still use today on SNL and the shows I work on. The reading all the sketches on Saturday morning before we start rehearsal. It's constant. It's rules set up to catch mistakes that we make or that the writers make, so that it doesn't go out to the floor when you're going to air it. with mistakes. It's just constant checking and double checking. But yeah, Tony set up most of the rules, and we use, I would say 90% of them to this day because they were so good and so insightful. And everything that he taught me, it's basically just when you're on the floor, you're acting professional. You're not just looking at the cards, you're looking at the actors, you're looking at the other cue card guys to get, if someone's out of a place, you're looking at the cameras. There's all these things going on that you have to be aware of. And then, if it's an easy sketch, you can just enjoy it. And, there's not a lot of moving parts. You can just kind of enjoy it. But yeah, Tony was really remarkable and set it all up. And he left after my third year. And I took over the show after my third season, when there were other people there that had way more experience than me. But Kevin and the show's producers picked me to run the show because of my poise and not panic attitude when things got crazy in crunch time. For some reason, again, I didn't panic. I could look at it. I could visualize it. We could make the changes and get it out really fast. So that's what got me to run it. So yeah, so Tony was a key part of everything and still is.
I appreciate hearing that. And I've got a couple questions. One of them you kind of alluded to, so I'm going to jump to it and then I'll go back to the narrative here.
Yeah.
Can you enjoy the sketches? Can you enjoy some of the things that are going on there? You alluded to it a little bit.
Yeah.
Did it take very long for you to be able to have that kind of awareness as your background senses kind of keep your awareness there so you can be present in seeing the material? Did that take long?
I enjoyed it right from the start because I was 25. I was working with Adam Sandler, Chris Farley. It was a ton of fun. And, having it grown up watching it from when it started in 75 as a 10-year-old, it was amazing. And I was always enjoying it. When I took over, there were probably about 4 years where I was not relaxed at all. It was panic mode because you're learning how to run that show. And that takes like 3 seasons. So it was rough. Training new people, trying to get them on the same page. It was rough. But once I get into a rhythm and once I had guys working for me that knew what they were doing and I could trust them to make changes and do things, then I get relaxed a little bit more and then I can enjoy it. Yeah. The thing is too, when the sketch airs on Saturday night for the live show, I've seen it rehearsed probably 6 or 7 times.
Right.
So unless it's something really original and really funny, or something happens that's not supposed to happen.
Yes.
I'm usually not laughing at that point. I may be smiling because the audience is laughing because I knew they'd laugh at a certain point, but I've seen it so many times. But there are sketches that I laugh every single time I hear a single line or something like that. And I think Alec Baldwin, in an article that was written about me, quoted saying, when you hear Wally laugh off to the side, you have a hit sketch, because I don't give a laugh very easy. And especially like he says, when it's the 7th time he's seen it, he's still laughing. Then he's like, oh, we knew we got something if Wally's laughing at it, which is really nice compliment for him to say.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the other things that you alluded to before is you're not just holding the card. You've got to be aware of what is going on there. Part of that is because many of the folks that you are working with, like you think about a Seth, okay, this is a trained professional that has been doing this for years, understands exactly, how to do this, how to do everything there.
Yep.
But SNL, you've got an actor, an athlete, a celebrity, somebody who is in the public eye that's there. And I would say many times hasn't had any experience with cue cards whatsoever. Correct. You're the guy that kind of works with the principal, right? You got a team of people, but you're kind of that trusted person with the star of the show that week. So I assume that there's a part of you where you're, almost doing it with them. You're a support pillar for that person. It's safe to say?
The key word, you already said it, is trust. I'm starting from day one when I meet them on Wednesday or Thursday with gaining their trust. That's what I'm trying to do. When I bring the cards out to the floor, I make sure there's no mistakes in them, not a word misspelled or a word missing, because I want them to trust that the cards are going to be right for them. I don't want them to worry about that. If there's like a line missing and we have to stop and I have to go put it in, I lose a little bit of trust, like, oh shit, could that happen on Saturday? In their head, they're thinking, So I'm just trying to gain their trust. I let them know, we'll rehearse it with one set of cards. I'll say your cards are going to be here, your main set. But when you talk to this person, you might want to play the cards that are going to be here. So I'll go over that with them. And then I'll say to them, if you want to underline anything or rewrite something so that it sounds, it sounds better for you, or like that.
Emphasis on a certain word or whatever.
Yeah, we're right. So Adam Driver's hosting next week. I just found out today. And hold on. He's one of my favorite hosts. I love him to death, but he makes me work my ass off because I go in with to his dressing room for every sketch, and he looks at every single card and he underlines and he does slashes and he say put this word on that line, that'll help me, and we do that, and we were constantly changing the cards. He's constantly doing that up and through Saturday. Yep. So I work my butt off, but he's such a pleasant guy and I love him so much that I don't mind it, and I'm like really looking forward to seeing him next week come back. So yeah, so some take advantage of it. Oh, some don't. Yeah, so it's great.
I was gonna say, you know, I think it was probably his first time that he was on based on Star Wars. You know, yes. he does, this is a good time to ask this question because this is another one that's on my list. The remotes, the please do not destroy videos, all of the, you know, the digital shorts, that kind of stuff. Do you ever work on the extras for these things as well? Or are you mostly just in the,
in the old days, studio? There used to only be like one remote per week. Yep. So either I would do it or I would assign somebody depending on when it is. Now that there's 3 most weeks, we just write the cards up, and they have an intern or a production assistant hold the cards up, and they'll do changes on them, and they'll do them. They don't usually use them as much as they would in a regular sketch because they do it over and over again. And they have time, because it's film, they have time to study their lines and learn their lines. So they're just there kind of as backup. But they wanted me, like, can't remember who, maybe it was when Mick Jagger hosted, somebody like big like that, when he was doing one of the shoots, they asked if I would go and help it out, and I was like, look, I need to be here for rehearsal. I can't, you know, or I had to be, or I'm working on Seth and I can't, but I'll send one of my best guys there. You know, once in a while they'll want us to do it, but for the most part, you know, no, they're just, we print the cards up and say good luck. You know.
How many people on the team?
It rotates like 13 or 14, you know, depending on the day. I mean, I have 3 full-time working on Fallon, and I have 3 full-time and 2 part-time working on Seth. And then SNL, like there's 3 or 4 on Thursday, and then Friday there's maybe like 9 or 10, because that's where we do all the printing and the duping of the cards. And then Saturday there's usually like 10. So a lot of the people that work on Fridays will work on Fallon and work on Seth. You know, I interchange them and move them around and kind of thing like that.
I know we're jumping around a little bit. We'll get back to the narrative in a second, but it's the idea of how quickly the scripts evolve and how much they change. And I mean, I think about, okay, so let's talk about like when Seth was doing Weekend Update, and there'd be a Stefan, you know, or a Stefan, I should say, you know, sketch, and you know, you'd see Bill Hader that they inserted a joke or something like that, like late. Yes. How many times on a Weekend Update would you be updating and changing cards? Like from Wednesday to Saturday, it must be constant.
We don't print update till Saturday. It doesn't get printed.
So update's a different animal.
So I have 2 guys that work just on update. They're not working on the other part of the show. They work on update on Saturday. They start getting scripts around 12 or 1, the features first, and then they get the jokes around 3 in the afternoon, and they print those up. So that gets done all on Saturday. That was just Mulaney making changes. When Bill would go get ready to go update, he'd leave and he'd be like, okay, we're set. He said that. And then Mulaney would be like, I got a couple more changes for you. And then he would put it, and we didn't know that Bill didn't know about him. And then we found out, we caught on because Bill would start laughing. And I was like, did you know that? He's like, no, I didn't know it. Fucking Mulaney. But then it got to be kind of Lorne. He liked to do it every time he did it. So it was really fun. It was really fun. Yeah.
Keep them on their toes. Okay, so let's go back now. So 1990 to 1993, you're working with Tony, you're working with Kevin. It's kind of business as usual. You're the new guy. At that point, what franchises was that company responsible for?
It was Letterman. It was on the 6th floor at SNL, and then Tonight Show on the West Coast. So I would routinely
wait a second. Down. You guys did cards for Johnny Carson?
No. Oh no, I think Video Q did. Yeah, Video Q did for then, and for Jay for sure. So I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think so. But I know Jay for sure.
Yep.
I don't know, but I think we probably did if we had the account with Jay. I bet they probably did.
Sure.
So yeah,
Jay moved over in 92, 93-ish was when Jay.
Yeah, so they probably did. They probably did. I never get to experience that, which would have been amazing, or meet him. But
Yeah.
So I would routinely go down and help out a Letterman, like I do now. Like if they were short a person or somebody had to go somewhere, I'd go down and fill in for rehearsal, and I'd do the show again because I was good at holding. So they like that. And Dave was very picky about who he'd want on the set.
Yes.
And because my brother was writing on the side, I was instantly okay. I was okay because my brother gave me clout without me ever showing up. And then I knew how to act on a set. I went to Syracuse. I went to, I was professional. That's the other thing too. You look for someone that's going to act professional on these sets. And, Dave was Dave, and he wanted to run a tight run ship, and he wanted to know the people who were going to be around him. And I think on like the first or second week I was helping out, he tossed the football my way. And I knew, I was like, oh, okay, he's throwing the football to me. I guess I'm okay. I wouldn't say anything. You just toss it my way and catch it, throw it back, between
Were
breaks.
you holding cards at the time?
No. He wasn't trying to throw me off. I have a funny story about someone that didn't work out. This is a great story. One of my favorite stories. Kevin, there was this girl that worked for Kevin off and on. I'm not going to say her name.
Okay.
She did cue cards for SNL a little bit when she'd fill in and stuff. And they needed someone. I was helping out at Letterman, and she was, or maybe I wasn't. Maybe Kevin told me the story. He said to her, "Look, Dave runs a tight ship down there. Don't say anything to Dave. Don't, if he says something to you, sure, talk to him and stuff like that. But don't, just don't, go down and do your job." She's like, "Got it, no problem." They walk out on set. Literally walk out on the set. She does a beeline right to Dave, puts her hand out. "Hi, Mr. Letterman. My name's Liz. My name's whatever. I'll be doing your cue cards today." And he's like, oh, great. Shakes her hand. She turns away with a big smile on his face, like to Kevin, like, "What's the big deal?" And Dave points at her and goes, she's out. Kevin's like, "You gotta go." And she's like, "What? I don't know." He's like, "I told you not to." She was done. She never worked on that show ever again.
Oh, that is so funny.
He was like, just like someone that just doesn't listen to, doesn't know common sense, just common sense. You're working on this show, don't. She just goes right. She's like, "I'm going to show you. He's a pussycat. He's fine." Dave ran a tight ship. He tried to warn her, but I loved it down there. It was, having watched it in college and then going to work on it, was the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Did you did you ever have any interactions with Hal Gurney?
Sure.
Yeah.
Hal was there when I was.
Anything pop up about Hal right now? We're going to do a little name association near the end, but Hal Gurney is one of the ones that I'm curious about. He's one
I don't have any specific stories about Hal. Just that, when I started SNL, Davey Wilson was the director there.
Yeah.
And Hal and Davey seemed like they were cut from the same cloth. I don't know if Hal smoked in the control room, but Dave did. And they just seemed like these old guys that have been doing TV forever. And I loved it. And I was like, these guys are great. They're grizzled veterans. And Hal was usually in the control room most of the time. He didn't really come out to the floor a lot, Yeah. So I don't remember any specific encounters or anything like that. But I remember him just being a great guy, being really, really nice.
You talk about these, these old school showbiz guys. And I think Lorne Michaels and David Letterman and his people both probably have this in common. You've got these two kind of younger, cutting edge, changing the face, changing the franchise, evolving things.
Mm-hmm.
And they surround themselves, of course, with cutting edge people like that, younger people, but then they also have this love for old time show business, and they put old time show business people and get them involved as well. And I think Hal and Dave are both examples of that.
Yeah, and Dave, what I've noticed too, very loyal, very loyal. You do a good job on his show. You're there for as long as you want to be there. You know what I mean? Some of the people worked there for years and years and years. And I think Lorne, behind the scenes stuff is like that. Lorne, you get the best in there and you want to keep them there. You don't want them doing anything. You don't want them doing anything else,
I don't know if you're still up on what Dave is doing now. He's got his Netflix show, My Next Guest Needs No Introduction, and he's doing the long form thing now. He's kind of doing the Tom Schneider thing now. Lorne Michaels is one of the guys that I would love to see Dave go long form with. It's funny how you've got these two magnetic people that you really haven't seen in the same room together. Really, they talk about each other clearly. Outwardly have a professional regard for each other, but it's funny to me that those two haven't interacted. I would love to see Dave pick Lorne's brain, and probably vice versa as well. Interesting cats, and you've had a chance to work with both of them. Talk a little bit about Lorne Michaels.
Oh my God. Well, first of all, that may happen either with Dave or in some form. The 50th is going to be next season, the 50th
Yes.
anniversary of SNL. So you're going to see a lot of stuff like that with Lorne, probably cast members and all kinds of different things sort up. So
I
you
still
never
think
know.
about SNL 40 to this day. That was a
Oh,
phenomenal
right. That was the
thing.
hardest show I've ever worked on in
I
my.
can only imagine. Yeah. Yep.
I'm already thinking about the 50th because it's doing my job with sketches 3 times as long, with celebrities 5 times as many celebrities in the sketch and watching you, and I have to do it in a tuxedo with slippery shoes, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Anyway,
get the sandpaper, sand the bottom of them.
yeah, Lorne. I mean, Lorne has been so gracious to me. I didn't fully know him well, as most employees, until maybe my 9th or 10th year there.
Yep.
And then once you get established and you see how things work, you start chatting, occasionally he'll say hi. You see him, maybe at the party, you say hi. And then it gets, he came down and sat at the table I was sitting at with a couple of writers, and we talked about our kids. We talked about baseball. He's very gracious. The birthday gifts I get every year from him are fantastic. And when I'm sick, the get well and the soup and the flowers he sends now. And it's just, he's very a great boss and a great man, and still very, very involved in the show. And the key part of the show, key part of the show. And he loves cue cards as much as I do. He feels like cue cards are a part of the show. And sometimes we'll have to do, hasn't happened recently, but sometimes we'll get a change so late, like a minute before the sketch, we do the changes in front of the actors on the floor, in front of the audience.
Yep.
And he always watches. And he came up to me at the party last time we did it, and he was like, I loved seeing you on the floor tonight. And I was like, I'm always on the floor. He's like, no, on the floor doing those changes. He's like, that's the stuff the audience loves, that they'll never forget. And you guys do it so well. He was like, it's just one of those parts that you can't predict when it's going to happen. But when it does, he's like, you guys are so good at it. And the audience loves it. I mean, they gave us applause after we finished and got up to do the cards, as they were counting down 10, 9, and we were picking up the cards again. So it's pretty fun. Yeah, he's great. I love him.
I, as an audience member, I haven't had the SNL experience. I know people who have, of course, and I've talked to people who worked on the show and that, and it's a different show. It was for Letterman too. Being in the crowd for a hot Letterman show was an experience unto itself. Where Dave would come out and he would say an inside joke that only the audience knew, that kind of a thing. SNL has that same magic. I think that's another comparison that can be made between the two. Sure. Even up to last week or a couple weeks ago, I was watching one of the more recent episodes since the strike ended, and sometimes it'll go out to commercial. It'll come back and you'll hear the band playing. You'll see them setting up the sketch, and then it'll go out for another commercial and come back. And I couldn't believe it. I said to my wife, I'm like, oh, there's Lorne. Lorne was standing right in the middle of it. And it was so cool to see him on the floor, to kind of get a taste of that. You get to see that every week and be a part of that every week. I mean, long, grueling hours, insane stress and whatnot, which you seem to be able to deal with. You're not tired of it at all, are you?
No. People ask me if I'm going to retire, what I'm going to do. My pat answer is I'm going to keep on doing it as long as my body holds up and allows me to.
Yeah.
I don't know if you read any stuff about, I do. So when SNL ends in May, I go into a orthopedic doctor and I get a cortisone shot, and I do 6 to 8 weeks of physical therapy over the summer to get ready for the next season. I consider myself
shoulders, is it wrist?
Shoulder, my right shoulder. And it's from doing this, pulling cards and pulling cards this way, and pulling cards this way, and going up and down. It's that motion of doing that for SNL. Seth doesn't bother me. It's the SNL sketches that are heavy. So I do that every summer. I consider myself like a really bad, like the worst athlete getting ready for the next season. Like, he can't believe he's still working. And it usually strengthens my arm, my shoulder up, and I get through till like March. It starts hurting a lot. I limp into May, and then I do that procedure all over again. I get the cortisone shot, and I do the physical therapy. I have a doctor's appointment on Friday because my shoulder's already hurting me.
Have you looked at the stem cells yet?
No, we don't even take x-rays. I just go in and say cortisone shot, I'll do physical therapy, I'm good. I might need to try something new. because it's hurting me in November, and that's not a good sign for my shoulder. So
a lot of folks, man, shoulders and knees seem to be the one of the sweet spots for them stem cells. It seems
really
to be,
interesting.
yeah. Oh yeah, shoulders, knees, elbows, things like that. Yeah, it seems to be the.
I'll ask the doctor about that.
Yeah, you maybe need a trip down to Panama or something like that over the summer. I want to talk about late night beforehand, and then I want to go to the transition, because I can only imagine what your perspective would have been during the late shift time, and the time where, okay, yeah, Leno is the horse, Letterman, limited time, gonna move. Obviously, that shook the world that you were in at that point. I want to get to that, but before we get to that, any other late night, because Late Night with David Letterman, again, this revolutionary franchise that you are still a part of, you were there kind of at the foundation of it. I'm
looking at my notes. So I told you we used to watch it in college. Every night we watched it. We would do our homework. We would get stoned and we watched the Letterman show, and we laughed our asses off. So when I graduated, I was living in New York City. My brother, they used to play softball in the summer. Dave played as well. Dave would come to the games and play softball.
Absolutely.
I get to
quite
come
the athlete as well.
Yeah, he was great. So I get to come and play a couple games. And Larry Jacobson was one of the writers at the time. I don't know if you've interviewed him or
not yet. He's on my list. I want him.
He was one of our favorites. And the sketches always made us laugh. And we swore, like, they're writing for stone people. They have to, because it's making us laugh. It's like, it's right in our wheelhouse. So we're having some beers after a game, and I say, Larry, I got to ask this, and I hope this doesn't upset you, but we watch Letterman, we watch your show, and we would get stoned and watch it, and we swear, like, you guys write for stone people, because it's really speaking to us, and it would make us laugh. And he's like, really, Wally? He was like, did you maybe think we were stoned too while we were writing it? And I was like, no, that never crossed my mind. He's like, well, it happens. And I was like, that makes perfect sense. Thank you very much for clearing that up. So that was one of the things I was like, oh my God, I'm so stupid, but naive maybe, because I was young, 25, 26, but it just made me laugh really hard. And I was like, oh, I get it now that it's speaking to us. And then I think it was still, well, when he went to CBS, what was 90?
He went to CBS in 93.
93. Okay. I have a 94 story.
Yeah.
Quick one, I think.
No.
I went to Woodstock 94 with Larry Bud Melman and held cards for him. Is that interest you in any?
Are you kidding me? Oh,
nope.
My God.
Summer of 94, I get a call. They need a cue card guy to go. Tony didn't want to go. Tony wasn't going to go. And I was like, what is it? He's like, we're doing a remote piece with Larry Bud Melman at Woodstock. You want to go? It'll be like 2 nights. We'll stay overnight. We'll do things. It's like, of course I want to go. I saw Larry Bud Melman. He did a tour when I was in college, and he came to Syracuse in this dingy bar with these dancers, these girl dancers. It was the worst show I'd ever seen, but we loved it. We absolutely loved it. So then 2 years later, I'm going to Woodstock and holding cards for him, which was insane. All I remember, I think Dave Hansen, the Dave writer, I think Dave Hansen went with us. I'm pretty sure it was Dave. It was either Dave or Donna. I'm pretty sure it was Dave. Yep. And I just remember driving out there, mud everywhere. Was that mud Woodstock?
The Nine Inch Nails set. They went and played in the mud, and then they got on stage and played. I'll never forget that. Nine Inch Nails is one of my favorite bands. I'll never forget that.
Larry was miserable the entire time. He was miserable.
Oh.
We did not want to be there. But everyone, like, we weren't going up on stages. We were just doing little remotes, like in different places with him speaking. I was holding his cards for him. And he was just reading straight from the cards, no delivery whatsoever. That's Larry. And people loved him. He hated it. I think we left a day early because he was like, I gotta get out of here. I don't want to do this anymore. Yep. It was like that kind of thing. But to me, it was like my first time I traveled with cue cards and stuff. It was amazing. I just remember it being the greatest experience of my life. It was so much fun.
Shout out to Steve Weiner, by the way. Steve Weiner, legendary Letterman writer for the first couple of years. He's the guy who discovered Calvert.
Really?
He had him in his student film and used
it.
Was
he there in 94? Was he still there in 94?
No. He was only there at the very, very beginning.
Okay.
He left and Carl Tiedemann left. They're the ones that brought Calvert in. They left. Calvert stayed. That's how that went. So, but his also the guy who wrote the pencil through the card through the glass with the glass breaking. That was a viewer mail that Steve Weiner wrote. So anytime I have a chance to mention Steve, I mention him.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
I
awesome.
love him.
So I did that. So let's move. Yeah. So what was the question?
Well, hold on a second, because this is interesting right here. This actually marries it perfectly.
Okay, perfectly.
That's when Letterman's over at Late Show. Tony had left by that point, but still, obviously, you're in the business. You've networked with each other. It's a very small fraternity of people that do what you do and understand how to do it at that level. So when he left, did he become an employee of Pants at that point? And because they've owned the show, or was that vendor company still the company that was being used for Late Show?
Video Q was still
amazing.
Yeah, Video Q was still in play.
Okay.
So they not only did they get Dave's new show, they get Conan took over, right? Yeah, was Conan taking over there the late night. They get coded as well, so they get a new show. And
then when Dave started Late Show, they might have had Snyder or Kilborn or whatever that might have been in play as well. Then potentially,
I think he used Prompter Kilborn.
Oh, okay. And Snyder, Snyder was a different deal. I don't know if Snyder.
Yeah, so just Tony went over there, and then that's when I took over SNL, and I got crazy busy, but. We would help out and we would send people over to, if it was the same thing, like it was one company, like, so Tony needed an extra guy or needed somebody else, we'd send him somebody over from SNL that I was working with. And it was a separate little thing, but it still worked, it still worked out like one thing.
So did you ever work the Ed Sullivan Theater at all in the first couple of years when the transition happened?
All the time. I was there all the time. I was there helping. Yeah, I was there all the time. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of my story. No, but again, it was, if Tony needed an extra person, or if the second, I don't remember who Lorne Eckert, maybe this guy, Lorne Eckert was there, but if he couldn't work, like if he went away for a week, I'd fill in if I wasn't doing SNL, if SNL was off. Yep. You'd always want to try to get like somebody with the most experience to go over there. Tony wanted like the best to go over there. So you'd start with, if I couldn't do it, then we worked out. We always do it like that, seniority kind of thing. And Tony liked me. So I was there a lot, and my brother was there too. So I wanted to go over there, and I always like to see him work, go out there. And again, so Dave wanted somebody that he was familiar with, and he liked me. So that I think I was over there a bunch.
When was your first encounter with David Letterman?
Maybe throwing the football, throw like that. We just, again, I know, it's that thing. Maybe, and I played, like I said, I played softball with him. Yep. I used to go to the Christmas parties as well. I have a Christmas party story. I was sitting with my brother and all the writers, and I brought my now wife. She was my girlfriend at the time. I was trying to impress her, and it was down at the ice skating rink. It was always at the ice skating rink downstairs. Yep. And they'd set up, it's an open bar, and I was sitting there, and the writers were doing tequila shots. And I don't know who started it, but I think probably Dave. Dave threw food at our table. We were sitting there either as a, hey, you guys are being too loud, or hey, let's get something started. So they started throwing food back at him, like rolls and stuff like that. And I thought that was the greatest thing. Like, oh my God, we're having a food fight with David Letterman. Like that's the coolest thing. I don't remember. I know I held cards for him too. I know I filled in probably for Tony. Like if Tony was sick or Tony couldn't do something, I know I filled in for him as well. Like I was up holding cards in his dressing room and stuff like that. And he knew me really well, just not that we wouldn't, conversate, it was just it was a work relationship. And, he knew Spike was my brother, and that was instant, cred for me. So he was always nice to me and always pleasant. And I would have never a bad thing to say about him. He was like one of my idols, growing up, watching him. I watched his morning show when I was maybe 8th or 9th, I think 9th grade, the summer after my 9th grade in high school. I was at a summer course because I wanted to write, and my high school was really small. We didn't have any writing classes. So I went to summer school at the college next town over, Monday through Friday. We slept over, and I had classes, I think from 8 to 10, and then 11 to 1 or something like that. Or I had a 2-hour break, and his morning show was on right during my break. So I watched that every day. I watched, and that was when I was like, this is the greatest thing in the world. And then they canceled it. I was like, no, I love this show, but it was just the wrong time slot. It's not ready for that time slot. But I knew him then. I knew him from back then. It was amazing. It was amazing.
What's really cool? Like I'm 47 at the time of this taping. And there seems to be a commonality about folks who admire Dave, and it doesn't matter what generation, it doesn't matter what grad class year you had, you know, whether it was 84 or 94. It seems to me that there is a consensus of people who were in high school looking at whatever incarnation of Letterman that they had and realizing that adults were allowed to act this way in this part of the world mythos. And it's like, oh, I can act silly like that, or I can be, you know, and I think that just appealed to a certain personality type or whatever it is, because I feel that exact same way the first time I saw him, even though he was established in late night when I was 9 or 10 years old. So I'm at a sleepover, I can remember. And then I would sneak up to watch these adults acting this way. I think there's just something about that. It's keeping the childhood alive or something. I don't know.
That's what well, you know, my dad my dad wanted to be a comedian, but never tried to be a comedian. He was really funny. He was a salesman. And he turned us on to SNL and Mel Brooks in Monty Python and stuff, but also Carson. So we would watch Carson monologues a lot. And I was always finding it fascinating that he always got laughs, sometimes bigger laughs where the joke was terrible just for the facial expressions he was making and stuff like that. But then, so that was like, you know, my dad loved Carson. But when Letterman came on, it was almost like speaking to a new generation. Like it was, because Carson wasn't silly, like he would do sketches, but it wasn't anything like what Dave was doing. And I think it started speaking to our generation and the younger people. Like my dad liked it too, but not as much as we did. Like, this is our guy. This is our Johnny Carson. He's speaking to us. And then, no matter how when you discover him and then you start watching all the shows and stuff, it's just fantastic. I think that's what it was.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Let's talk about you and your brother for a second. Both of you don't seem to enjoy your given names. Is that fair to say? Two brothers, both in the entertainment business, both went off in these crazy directions. Both have interesting nicknames as their everybody knows him as Spike. Everybody knows you as Wally.
Yeah, I'm going to call my mom.
Start? Was that in the house?
Call my mom, and I'm going to have you ask her that question. Do you enjoy that your sons are called different names? She hates it. Okay. And I'll tell you the good story. So Spike, his real name is Michael.
Yep.
He started at SNL. Mike Myers was there. Mike Shoemaker was there as well.
Yeah.
So Shoemaker and my brother was the receptionist, and they were like, "Wait, we're not going to have another Michael." And Lorne Michaels, whatever. So he had Spikey here. My brother had Spikey here at the time. So Shoemaker said, "You're Spike," and that's how we get the name.
Mike Shoemaker nicknamed your brother.
Yes, nicknamed my brother. Yes.
Huh. Okay.
So me and my brother shared a room growing up, and I had asthma growing up.
Yep.
When I got sick, I would wheeze with the asthma. So he, as the older brother would do, Wally the Wheezer as a derogatory nickname. And we were 11 months apart, Irish twins. So we had the same friends, my friend group, his friend group, we all hung out together, small town. And first party I went to, this is my brother Wally. So I was Wally in high school, and I hated it. Because it was a derogatory name, you know. He was Wall. It was something that it was born out of hate, you know, born out of making fun of me.
Yeah.
So I went to Syracuse, and because for the writing program, but also no one from my town went to Syracuse. So I was Chris for 4 years at Syracuse. I moved to LA. I was Chris for 3 years at LA. So 7 years I was back to Chris, Christopher, whatever you want to call me. I moved to New York. He got me the interview at SNL. He brought me in for the interview. This is my brother Wally. And I was like, oh my God, Wally's back. So it was back. But looking back, Chris the cue card guy is way not as cool as Wally the cue card guy.
It's not. Automatic poetically, it is perfect.
It's
like when Seth
perfect.
even on Strike Force 5, our cue card guy Wally, like the way that it has a rhythm to it, has a flow to it.
Yeah. So I fought it for 7 years, but ultimately my brother, it didn't mean it, but he's got good sense, and he's got a really good, you know, sense of humor. And Wally worked out for me pretty well. I'm not gonna deny it. Yeah.
Let's go to the transition for a second here. You know, the scuttlebutt is Dave's leaving. You know, and I mean, if ever somebody's been in a place, a workplace where there's movement happening at the top of things, you know, the movers and the shakers are moving and shaking right now, and everybody underneath is like, oh, what's going to happen? That must have
Yeah.
been a pretty interesting time. And then the cast was shifting at SNL too. Like you talked about, Lovitz and Hartman and Carvey and
Yeah.
Nealon and all those guys, Miller. But then the new crop was coming in, extremely competitive, lots of documentation on that.
Yeah.
With Sandler and Spade and
Yeah.
Farley and all these other guys coming in to mix with the old crew.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting time to be working in 30 Rock with all of that movement happening. Safe to say?
There were just, it was like rumors every day about what was going on, what was happening. And Spike would hear things, being a writer on the show, he would hear things, but he was like, I can't talk about it, what I just heard. And I can't say this, or I can't say that, and this is going to happen. And yeah, it was anything, everybody was talking about it. Even if they didn't watch the shows, you knew. I think, my brother told this story, and I'm going to steal it. If you ever interview them and tell it, he says he wants to tell this story. Tell him I already told it.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds great. Can't wait to do that.
He was working one day. They were in the writer's room, and I think it was Tom Brokaw came in, and it was just after it happened, because I think they were
after the announcement, or
I think so.
Yep.
They're after the announcement or right before. I think it was right after. And Brokaw came in, and he was like, I want to tell you guys a funny story. He was like, I was on assignment in Africa. And so I flew out to Africa, and then we took a train to another place. And then we had to fly this little puddle jumper to this really remote area. We get out of the plane, we meet our guide. The guide says to me, hey, what's going on with the Letterman Leto thing? In the remote jungles of Africa.
Yes. People do not realize that's how big it was. It was huge at the time. Yes.
That blew me away. Me away, like going, holy shit.
Yep.
Everybody in the world was talking about it. It was such a big deal. Yeah. So yeah, it was big. I don't remember specific things. I remember you get bits and pieces every day. It's a different story. Like I said, my brother would maybe tell me things once in a while that he heard, but nothing was, reliable. You didn't know what was going on. You really didn't know what was going on until it happened.
It's neat that you mentioned Brokaw, because episode 1 of late show, Brokaw's there, and what does he do? He steals a cue card.
Oh, that's right.
This is the intellectual property of NBC, which I loved, and that dovetails perfectly into something that I've got a couple guilty pleasures that I'm going to ask you about today. 2 white whales that I would absolutely be in awe to have on this show. One will not happen because he's passed away, and I got to ask about him. The other one might be able to. There's 2 of them, Norm McDonald and Brian Williams. Those are my 2 white whales. Norm McDonald. Now you're on SNL. Tony's moved over. You are now kind of the head guy for SNL, or it's becoming that way. You work on Update. You do some of these things. Norm McDonald is now christened the host of Weekend Update. During the OJ stuff, the top brass at NBC are not impressed with him. They fire him kind of pretty publicly. As that happens, he goes on panel on Letterman and talks about the whole thing while he's still working there. I am fascinated by that. I talked to Joanna Jordan and a couple other people about that. Do you remember it? Do you have any memories of that time with Norm and any Norm stories? Because I just absolutely adore the man.
Well, first of all, I'm gonna tell you that I used to write jokes for Norm because I wanted to be a writer. Jim Downey was running Update at the time, so I would rehearse. This is probably, when did Norm take over Update? Was it do you know? Remember?
I want to say it's 95, 90. It might have been 98 actually.
So
I can find that out though. I can find that out.
So I was running the show at the time. I would work from 11 in the morning till 11 or 12 at night. And then I'd go up to 17 from 12 to 4 in the morning and write jokes with Norm, Jim Downey, Jim Downey was producing it. And then they had they had Update writers, and they had freelance guys. There were a couple other freelance guys. They were gracious enough to let me go up there and write jokes. So what you would do is there were all these AP photos that you could look at photos and see if you had a joke, find a joke that was funny about the photo. If you wrote something funny, you had to read the joke out loud in front of everybody around the table. Okay. Now this is after me working all day. But this is what I wanted to do. And it was the most terrible thing in the world. I think I probably got 15 jokes on with Norm. 2 of those jokes were OJ jokes. So I'm going to say that I'm responsible for Norm getting fired, but
he must have been tickled by that.
Well, I knew he liked to read them. So why are you not going to try to pitch OJ jokes? If you can write a funny one. So I would do that. So I was in on the inner sanctum of all that. But Norm, they didn't care. They weren't like the normal update guys. They would always end an update with the worst joke or a controversial joke. They would rather get a gasp or silence than a big laugh to end. If you go back and watch them, you can see them. They didn't care. They loved that. They loved that visceral reaction. Now, it doesn't have to be a laugh. They wanted to get a visceral reaction from the crowd. So Norm didn't care. So it doesn't surprise me that he would go out and tell all. I made a mistake once I ruined a joke. I was holding cards for him and he read the setup and the cards stuck together. Sometimes we tape up if they do a rewrite on it and the cards get, and it stuck to the other card and I couldn't get it out fast enough for him to read the punchline. Ruined the joke completely. Never told the punchline, ruined it. I was like mortified. I was so upset with myself. And I mouthed to him, this is during the live show. And I said like that. And he was like, it's okay, Wally, don't worry about it. It's all good. On live TV. Like, no, don't say, no, you just made it worse. You just made it. But that was Norm. He didn't care. He didn't care about this was live TV. He did not care. So, he wasn't going to be told what not to do and what to do. He was going to do it the way they wanted to do it. And unfortunately, he got fired over it. And he came back a year or two later and I was doing cards for, I don't know what show. He came to maybe visit or something. And I asked him if he missed it. He's like, of course I missed this. This is the greatest job in the world. He's like, I screwed up, but you know what? It is what it is, He was the greatest to me. He was so nice. He gave me my first break writing, for jokes for him. So it's amazing.
That is incredibly sweet. 94 to 97, by the way, was Norm's run on Weekend Update.
So I was 29 and I could only do that at that age,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Staying up till 4 and then getting maybe 5 hours sleep and then doing all SNL, maybe that's why I was so stressed out because I was staying up till 4 writing jokes. I don't know. Go figure.
Let's talk a little bit more about Tony. He obviously entrenching himself at Late Show. I don't know, again, but the hours that you kept, if you were able to watch Late Show ever, Don Giller on his channel, on his YouTube channel, has the Tony Mendez. It's the ultimate Tony Mendez compilation. It's like 7 parts, an hour and a half on each one. Did you get a kick watching Tony Mendez become a character on Letterman and scream at him in Spanish and do these things and all these crazy things?
Unbelievable. It was so much fun to watch. And he was so gracious to me. He was doing all that stuff. And a lot of times, like People magazine would come, we're doing this behind the scenes on People in Business. We want to put you in it. And he was like, no, I don't do any, you should go Wally at SNL. And he would always recommend them to me and put me, very gracious like that, it was so much fun watching Tony because I knew him personally and knew the kind. And he, like I said, he was a really strict by the book guy, but he also had a great sense of humor and was really fun to work with. And when there wasn't stress around, he was joking around with everybody. And some of the things he did behind the scenes were probably as funny as some of the things he did on camera. And Kenny Among, who was a big longtime producer on SNL, I would tell him these Tony stories that Todd would maybe relate or somebody relate to me, and he would just die laughing. Kenny kept a clip of a newspaper article that Tony was interviewed for SNL.
Yep.
And when you're interviewed for an article for SNL or something like that, there's usually a publicity person with you, or they say, "Hey, nothing derogatory about the show." You've got
a leash on you, yeah.
And Tony, they asked him, "Oh, who's the worst host?" And Tony just with breaking I forget who he said. This person was the worst. They were terrible. They did this, they did that. Just all out the window. And Kenny has that clipping. He had kept it every day and just made him. When he needed a laugh, he would open it up and read that again because Tony was another one like Norm McDonald. He did not care.
Yeah.
One of my great Tony stories from the later days when he was at Late Show. Todd relayed this story. Tony did Dave's monologue, and basically that's all he would do. He would work with Dave in his monologue and get his monologue cards, and he'd get the jokes, and he would print them all, and he'd be in his room all day. Todd would do all the rehearsing down on the stage.
Right.
Tony would be with Dave all day.
Yep.
So Tony knew what Dave liked. Tony knew how many jokes Dave liked to see. Tony knew, whatever. So one day, the two writers came, or a writer came and said, "Hey, we want to put these two new jokes in for the monologue," and it was maybe 2 hours before the show, plenty of time, not a big deal.
Yeah.
And Tony, and it's something I would never have the balls to do. Tony was like, "No, Dave's got enough jokes. He doesn't need those." Now Tony's just a cue card guy. He's not a producer. There's no way. But Tony's like, no, he doesn't need to see him. He's seen enough. He doesn't like to see more jokes. And he was like, no. We're the head writers. We want to get the jokes to Dave. And Tony's like, no, I'm not printing them up. I'm not doing it. So they went to Todd, and Todd printed them up, and down in the other section where Tony wasn't. And and Todd brought them up to Tony with the writers, and they said, "Tony, here you go. This is for the monologue." And he was like, "I told them no." And Todd's like, "Oh, well, I didn't know that." And Tony's like, "Okay, I'll give them to him." So he's like, so he grabs the cards and he throws them out the window, the 7th floor window of the building, out into like the courtyard. And he's like, I'm not giving to him. And the writers just looked at him like, what's going on? And they walked away like they had no thing, because Dave loved Tony, and Tony could do that stuff and know he could get away with it. Something happened where he didn't get away with it, but that was something different. He knew he was Dave's boy, and nothing he could do would really get him fired unless it was really, really, really bad. Throwing cue cards out a window, that's not gonna. The writers must have been very frustrated. But I told that story to Kenny, and we both laughed so hard. It's just like that's so Tony. That's the kind of guy Tony was. He was just like, no. And he's probably right. Dave probably didn't want to see him. He probably wouldn't have done him. Tony knows what how many cards he wants, how many jokes he has. He's got enough jokes already. He doesn't need to see those. Yeah, that's Tony.
We have
Mendez.
so many. I've been told, and so many stories about Tony Mendez, Inky Mendez.
Inky, yeah.
There was a contingent of people who started. The group is called Alt Fan Letterman, and they were the first kind of the infancy of the internet. These news groups would get together and they would have Letterman related discussions and whatnot. And in '95, they decided to start something called DaveCon, and they would all make a pilgrimage to the Ed Sullivan Theater and do their thing. And as the DaveCon DaveCon group got bigger, the one who embraced them, it seems to be more than anybody at the show, chiefly was Tony. And Tony would create these experiences for them, and he would give them a cue card at the end of the show, and do these just amazing things for the people who really supported the show. He really seemed to care for people, and it's just ran a tight ship, like you said, but also cared for people. And I'm glad we've had a chance to kind of talk a little bit about him. We're going to get to Todd in a second. But I do have a cue card question. Is there a specific way that you train your people to print? Like, are ours supposed to look the same, no matter who's okay? So there's a cue card alphabet that people are sort of expected to learn the dialect of it on paper.
It's block letters. It's all capitals.
Yep.
And there's certain ways to do, like, you go from up to down, like doing a D, you go down like that, a T, you go down, you don't go up.
Yeah.
And so if you do it all the same way, and when you're using these markers that are pretty thick, so it's not like regular, like you're printing with a pen or a pencil, you're moving your fingers. You're moving your hand up across the card, you're moving your hand across the card like this. So you're more drawing than writing. We call it printing, but it's really drawing the letters. So yeah, we train them the same way. So to the naked eye, a lot of people would be like, oh, this all looks the same. I can tell that it's all different from a different person. Like sometimes we split a sketch up and 5 different people will write 5 cards in a sketch. I can tell every person in it because it all looks different to me. But to the naked eye that's not trained, it pretty much looks the same.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
We get to 2004. What happened? What were the series of events that allowed you to kind of start thinking bigger and to step out on your own and start the company? And did that company, your company, immediately take over all of the contracts, including Late Show?
Yeah. So what happened was Kevin was still around, but he was rising pretty quickly through Nickelodeon.
Yeah. He had a pretty crazy trajectory, that guy. Yeah. I would love to talk to him one day. I just don't know if I could ever get to him because of how busy he is, but it's pretty crazy what happened with him.
Yeah. So so his uncle, we still sent hours to him. He would send the hours to the uncle in LA. paychecks would get delivered to him at Nickelodeon. We'd have to go pick them up. There was no direct deposit back then.
Yep.
And the busier he got, it was taxing on him. You know, he was a really big executive, and he's still helping his uncle out, and probably not for a lot of money. He wasn't really getting compensated for it.
Yeah.
So ultimately, things were falling through the cracks, like bills being paid and stuff like that. And our paychecks would bounce every other month. You'd go to cash it, and there wouldn't be funds enough to cash it, and it would bounce. And you'd be like, "Hey, I just did all this work, and my paycheck bounced." And it's not Kevin's fault; it's his uncle who's not doing it. And then I go to order cards. I'd order from the supplier, and he's like, "They haven't paid in 3 months. I can't send you any more cards." I'm not, you know. So it was almost it was kind of forced on me. I didn't want to own a company. I had no desire to do that. I don't know anything about it. My wife is in marketing in the corporate world. She helped start her dad's company. She was helping her brother do something. She was all over it. She was like, "I'll help. Let's do a business plan." I'm like, "What's that?" So I went to the shows and I just said, "Hey, if I start my own company," and it was at the time, it was Conan, Last Call with Carson Daly, and Saturday Night Live. And Tony was very loyal to the company as it was, and they were at another building, and he was like, I'm not want to get involved in this. I'm just going to stay with them. And I'm like, "That's fine." You know, I'll work it out with them.
Yep.
He was having the same kind of stuff, but he was very loyal to them. And that's all good. But my guys weren't going to work for me. They were going to quit because they weren't getting paid, you know? So, I went to the shows, and they were like, "Well, you're the one who's doing all the work, and everybody that works at the shows work for me. So if he said, 'No, we want to stay with Kevin,' then all my guys were going to leave, and they wouldn't have any department." So it was basically, they were fine with it. But, you know, like Kenny Among was like, make sure you do it the right way, try to do it the right way. And I probably didn't do it perfectly because I didn't really know what I was doing, especially because I went to those shows, I got a lawyer, and I was like, "This is what I want to do." And the lawyer was like, you said you talked to them before you started this company? Are you incorporated? And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Oh, you know, they could sue you." And I was like, "Really? And can they win?" And he was like, "Yeah, they can win because of what you did." Because again, I had knew nothing about companies. So I had all the
sad though, because it's like common sense. It's like, okay,
I know.
well, start a company. There's a need here.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
if I start this company, am I, you know,
Yeah,
are you going to have my back on this?
Yeah, I didn't want to start it and screw myself over and lose the job. But I had all the guys that were working there were going to go with me. So what I did was I got a lawyer, and then it's funny. We reached out to they found out I told them, and Kevin was very upset over it, as he should be. He's upset for his uncle, and they brought me into a meeting, and they said, "Look, my uncle's really sick. He's probably not going to be around for much longer. When he dies, we'll give you all the shows. You know, we'll sign a contract that's going to." Then this was what I said, 2004, right? I think he's still alive. 19 years later. I was like, "Well, I already have the show, so that's not really, you're not really giving me anything. I understand. We'll give you whatever, you know, they would offer me any salary I wanted." And I was like, "No, I don't think that's that." I go, "I'm going to talk to I'm going to talk to him, and I'm going to work out a deal." So I was like, "I'm going to give him a buyout. I'm going to, do a buyout." So I'm not like taking everything.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about that. So my wife had met, the name Rick Scott, the Florida governor, Florida senator.
Yeah.
He met him on a plane ride down to Florida before he was in politics. He was a billionaire flying coach. She sat next to him on the way down to Florida. 4 days later, she was sitting next to him again. They hit it off. We went out to dinner with him and his wife, and she was talking to him about this was when this was going on. Yeah. So we had a phone call with him, and he said, "Pay this amount, do it over 5 years. Make sure that they sign it. Make sure they do a non-compete, so they can't try to get the shows after 5 years back."
Right.
Kind of thing. He told us everything to do, and it was like the greatest thing. And so we did it. He never got a lawyer. The Don who owned the company never got a lawyer. He just had his accountant work it out. I paid him a pretty large sum of money. We did over 5 years. After 5 years, I was done, and the shows were, officially mine. But at least I gave him some money for taking the shows away. And like I said, it was a bad time. So I was really kind of doing Kevin. I did Kevin a favor, because once he got rid of that, having to give us paychecks and do all that stuff, he was, it was probably the best thing that could have happened for him.
Okay, so that's fantastic.
So that's what happened.
Out that way. And essentially, you became the succession plan for that company, and now you're still doing it to this day. We're 20 years after that, which is pretty crazy. Did you get Late Show then pretty quick? I didn't.
Well, no, I didn't do Late Show. Tony, that was still Video Q kept Late Show. until Tony was fired.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask, because Todd worked for you. And,
yes,
and I want to talk to Todd. I know you said you're going to hook that up. Hopefully we can make that happen. I would love to talk to Todd.
For time was working for Video Q and me. So he was working for both companies. So he was, they were still allowing that to happen. Like Todd could work for them, but if I didn't want somebody, whatever. So then when Tony was fired, they needed like one or two people to help Todd out.
Right.
And I was just going to send them over. It was David had already announced his retirement. It was like a year, maybe.
Yep.
And I was just like, hey, whatever I can do to help you guys out. You want to need one of my guys, two of my guys, certain days a week, not a problem. We'll figure out a billing thing, but don't worry about it. And they were like, no. If you're going to do that, we want to give you the account. And I was like, look, it's only, I don't want to cause any issues. I don't, they were like, no, it's fair. Video Q's kind of been a jerk to us lately. And we want to do it this way. So if you're going to do that, let's talk about, we want Todd to pay this amount of money and we want the second. They told me basically what they wanted to pay them.
The terms.
And then I could tack on to that. So I made some money. And so I had the late show account for the last year that it was there. So that was interesting. So I had that show as well. So I had all the incarnations of late night, except for Dave, So I had Conan,
but you still worked it. Let's talk about Todd for a second, because he takes over for Tony. You talk about a big shadow to be in. Now at that point, did you train him to get into it? Did Tony train him?
I think he might have started over there with Tony. Yeah. And then Tony would call me up and say, hey, do you need any help at SNL? And I'd be like, yeah, we just lost somebody. So he'd be like, oh, this guy Todd for me, he should work for you on Saturdays. So he would do that a lot and say that this guy Todd is good. And if Tony said that I knew he was good, So that I think Todd started with Tony. Tony found him somehow. He might have been an intern first, and then Tony, brought him up to Q Cards. And then then he started working for me, and then he was working for me, for those both. Yeah. Does
Todd still work for you?
He does. He's on paternity leave right now. Just had a baby with his wife.
Oh, congratulations to Todd, the Q Card guy. And I loved, there's the famous video of him jumping over a conference table and things like that. Like Letterman started using him as well, including, I believe there was a Q Card joke in the very last episode, and Todd got some. Yeah,
he would go. Todd would do Todd did a lot of remotes. He would go on. He went to the Super Bowl and interviewed people. Yeah, he did a lot of stuff like that because Dave didn't want to go to remote. So he's like, send Todd to the Super Bowl and let him interview football players and stuff. So Todd would go there with like 3 writers and they'd say, go Todd, go do this, go do that. And Todd would have ideas too. And yeah, Todd was really good at that. I thought he was really good at it.
That's lovely. And it's so funny. Again, I'm going to kind of full circle it as we kind of move towards the close. So if any other stories that you didn't get to that you want to say in a second here, that'll be the time. Yeah. But it's so interesting. I talked to cameramen and I talked to producers and the trades people, in construction and set design and all of that. And they're all union, and the union sends them to all sorts of different shows and different productions and whatnot. You guys aren't, but kind of enjoy that same privilege, being able to do these kinds of things. It's very, very interesting kind of learning the ins and outs of this stuff here. I really appreciate you kind of opening up the playbook and letting our viewers and listeners know how this whole Q Card thing works. What an odd, excellent life that you have built for yourself. Getting to know some of these people. One of the questions I have, going back, you have met, the laundry list of A-listers and just interesting people. Yeah. I'm not just saying famous and celebrities and all that sort of stuff. That stuff, comes and goes, and it has a half-life to the excitement of it. You're clearly pretty streamlined when it comes to this. Who are some of the people that you have met over the years that you're just like, yeah, that's a cool person, or I can't believe I met this person, or interesting? Who are some of the people that come to mind?
It's so many, and it's like I was a big Rockford Files fan because he reminded me of my dad. My dad passed away. And so James Garner Rockford was my favorite show. I wanted to name my first son's middle name I wanted to be Rockford. And my wife said, no, not a chance. So
what did it end up being?
Garner. So she let me have Garner.
Oh, that's great.
Only because he was 5 weeks early and we hadn't decided on a middle name yet. So we had to go. And I was like, come on, Garner. And she's like, all right, Garner. And he wasn't on SNL and he was never on Letterman when I was there, or Conan, but he was on Rosie O'Donnell's show one year after my son was born. I think he was probably 2.
Yep.
And I knew the segment producer, and I knew he was coming on. I was like, hey, can I bring my son in and just meet him? And I want to tell him my name to match him. She's like, of course. Yeah, of course. So like having that access. So I went in and I met him in the dressing room, and she was like, she warned me. She's like, he's really old. I just, want you to, I go, I know he's old. I've been following him his my whole life.
Yep.
So I went in to meet him. He was so nice. I told him the story about wanting to name my son a middle name Rockford. And he's like, you're an idiot. He's like, that would have been a horrible name. I was like, yeah, my wife agreed with you. So we named him Garner after you. And he was like, he's like, Garner's not my real last name. And I was like, wait, what? He's like, it's Baumgartner. They made me change it when I started acting. So you really didn't name him after me. But he was so nice. We took a picture with him and my son. He was so gracious. So meeting people like that, the heroes of your youth, has been, when I started, that was like the greatest thing. Someone would come on an SNL, or someone would be on Dave that I would see that I was a fan of when I was growing up. And that would blow me away. Here's the crazy thing now that I've been doing it for so long. Hosts are coming in that are saying, like last week's host, Jason Momoa, was on, and he was the second time he hosted. Great. Love the guy. We're very close.
Yep.
We were talking about, he was like, when I was like 9 or 10, I would steal a little black and white TV in Iowa. I would go out to the porch and I'd watch SNL, and I would watch Farley on SNL. And I go, that's when I started. So I'm getting these stories now of these celebrities that are hosting that were watching it when I started doing cards for it.
Yes.
And it's kind of blowing my mind a little bit, blowing my mind. That's been happening a lot lately. Kieran Culkin, when he hosted, I said, I was there when you and your brother hosted, and he was like, you were? And that gave us a connection, so he was so nice and really nice, sent me a really lovely gift after, and a lovely note. So that stuff is kind of crazy, really, really crazy.
The Macaulay Culkin show with David Bowie and Tin Machine way back.
And people thought that we didn't have cue cards for that show because he memorized everything. His father made him memorize all his lines. We did have cue cards. It was, we had to have cue cards for the actors, for the cast.
Of course.
But he memorized all his lines at whatever age he was, 8 or 9 or whatever he was. And I think his dad made him memorize everything.
Oh, that's a cool little piece of trivia right there.
Yeah, right.
This is I'm having so much fun. I hope you can come back, and if you do come back, I will have many things prepared to jog that memery. And maybe we do.
I have a good story, and I'm going to do the plug on Cue Cards by Wally, which we didn't touch on, but that's
both
okay.
and both. Yes.
If somebody wants to get their own cue card, a personalized cue card, I can't write live from New York and Saturday night. I can't write stuff like that. I can't write anything that's copyrighted. But if you want a Letterman, something from Letterman, like a character or something that you write yourself, or something that alludes, nothing that's copywritten, I can write it on a cue card. You can give it as a gift for Christmas, for a birthday, for anniversary. I'm getting a lot of stuff. I started this company, cuecardsbywally.com. You can go to. I started this during the pandemic, when people couldn't go to weddings and birthdays and anniversaries, and it kept me busy, but it brought so much joy to people getting this original gift, fans of the shows, that it was so heartwarming to me and to the people. I've gotten, I think, 100%. I've got not one complaint from a customer or a gift person that this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And it blows my mind, because really it's just marker on a card, on a blank card, but the cards we use on the shows, and people can't get them, and it blows people away. So I'm still doing that if somebody wants to get one, which is great. I can send you one with your name, and you can put it right in the background there. Do you have one?
Okay, well, hold on a second, because I'm going to do this right now. Hold on. I'm going to go off camera for a second. And I'm gonna grab. So this was a cut joke.
Oh, there's a joke. Yep, because Dave wrote them lengthwise like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it wasn't used on the show. It was cut, but it's a Tony Mendez
nice.
Cut joke.
Yeah.
So yes, right here I have, I love this stuff, and what a very cool idea to do this. I bet you wish you did it 10 years ago.
Well, here's the thing. Again, my wife, being the marketing genius and the entrepreneur, I pitched the idea to her in 2019, and she immediately said, nope, not. And I was like, okay. And then we're sitting 3 months COVID in, and I'm doing nothing, and I'm getting fat by doing nothing. And she said, I think I want to start another company, because she was bored too, even though she was working. And I was like, how about that cue cards by Wally thing? And she's like, yes, now is the time to do it because people need this. And she was right. So I don't think it would have worked maybe way back then. Now the COVID was the perfect time to launch it. And it keeps me busy, not as much as it was during COVID, but it's perfect. It keeps me busy on my off days or if I have a night off. So yeah, go to cuecardsbywally.com to get that and send me what you want with your show's title and something like that. We'll write it up and you can put it right in the background there.
I will. I absolutely will. And so a question about that. Do you have is there a phrase that gets used more than any others? Like we'll be right back with, or
something like us to do we'll be right. We have a great show tonight. So and so, is here. They put their friend's name in there. We'll be right back. One of the big ones is I can't do live from New York. I can do live from New York City. I can do live from Tampa Bay. I can do live from Cleveland. Yeah. So we do live from Cleveland. The Ferestens are having fun Friday night football or whatever it is, something like that. So people personalize it and they have their own little cue card thing. And I get a lot of people that will see it at a friend's house and say, oh, I saw it at my friend's house. I want to order one too. That was the greatest thing I've ever seen. They get them framed. It looks nice. It's something different that people don't have, and it's just another, again, so I never thought I would be a business owner and I have two cue card businesses, which is kind of crazy. Okay. Another quick story.
Yes, please.
Is that Rob Burnett over your left shoulder?
That's Rick Sheckman, but Rob, I saw Rob last month. You knew Rick? That's Shecky right there.
I knew Rick.
Yeah.
But you know Rob Burnett.
I do. Yes. Saw him last month at Rupert's retirement.
So I would work on the show every once in a while. My brother was still writing. This was when it was late show. And I get a call from Rob Burnett one afternoon out of the blue. And he was like, hey, Wally, what's up? And he's like, Rob Burnett. And I'm like, hey, Rob, what's going on? He was the head writer at the time.
Absolutely.
And I was like, hey, how you doing? He's like, you good? I was like, yeah, I'm good. And we're both silent for 10 seconds. I don't know why he's calling me. I don't know. It's Rob Burnett. He was like, oh, well, you want to do a writer's packet for the show to be considered as a writer? Now I was trying to write, and my brother I was writing for Space Ghost. I was writing for some other shows, and I was like, I would love to. Thanks so much. So we hang up, and I start writing. I call my brother, and I was like, Rob Burnett just called me out of the blue and asked me if I wanted to do. I go, did you say something to him? He's like, no. He was like, we did. He's like, oh yeah, he asked me if I want to do a packet, and he was like, oh, all right, great. So he calls me back an hour later, and he goes, I know what happened. He's like, did you call me earlier? I go, I did. You weren't there. I go, the receptionist wrote, call Wally, didn't put it in my brother's box, put it in Rob Burnett's box instead by mistake. So I had called my brother. So Rob Burnett got a note that said, call Wally. He's calling me, wondering what I want. He called me. I'm wondering what he wants because I didn't call him. I called my brother.
He filled the space by telling you to put a writer's packet in?
Didn't know. Maybe he thought I was too nervous to ask, So the moral of the story was I did a writer's packet. I didn't get hired, but if I had gotten hired, wouldn't that have been the best way in the world that you get hired on the show? I wasn't ready to write for that show, but he was very nice and actually let me write a packet and send it in. But he called me back later. This is a mistake, but he's like, send the submission in. Let's know. If you're good, we'll hire you. So it was amazing. It was pretty crazy. So I thought that'd be a funny story to end on.
What a sweetheart. I want to have Rob on so bad. I want to have Rob on here just to talk about Ed. I love the series Ed. I love. I really, really want to have.
You could do a whole different podcast with Rob. He must have so many stories. Many stories.
We've had Morty on. We haven't had Rob on yet. I really would like to. Get
Morty. I loved Morty too. Morty was really nice to me as well.
Absolutely. We've had Steve O'Donnell on, and I've gone out for dinner with him quite a few times already. Did you work with Steve at Space Ghost?
I know Steve very well. I worked with Steve. I'm the one who got Steve and my brother involved with Space Ghost. Because I wrote an episode and I don't remember, either I found the show or my brother found the show. He's like, you got to watch the show. And I watched it and I was like, I need to write an episode of that. So I called them. I called Turner. I called Space Ghost. I got the producer on the phone. I said, hey, I want to write an episode of your show. Like, who are you? And I was like, well, I write jokes for Norm McDonald. And I wrote a show called Wienerville. I wrote a show called Wienerville on Nickelodeon. Yep. And they were like, all right, send us a sample and we'll see. And they liked it, my sample. So I wrote an episode. And I told my brother about it. And I told them that my brother wrote for Letterman and they loved Letterman show.
Yeah.
I got my brother and Steve O'Donnell involved with Space Ghost after that. And Steve did a lot of stuff with them, I think, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like for those who haven't
watched my brother wrote an episode
Coast to Coast, you have to watch it because it's
amazing.
It's Dave and Morty and Paul, but it's Zorak, it's Space Ghost, Zorak and Moltar, but it's so good. It's so good.
Once my brother heard about it and saw that I wrote an episode, he was like, I definitely want to write an episode. So I was like, I'll send him your way. So I said, the guy was ecstatic. He's like, he hired me and he got my brother and Steve O'Donnell, running for Letterman. So he was so happy. So yeah, no, I know Steve O'Donnell well. I had a weird instance where I went up to, I saw him on the street and I said, hey, Steve, how you doing? And he just ignored me and walked away. And I was like, why do you do that? And I found later, he has a twin brother.
I was just going to say.
And it was Mark, and I didn't know he had a twin brother. I was like, that was weird. I told my brother, Steve just blew me off. I said, he's like, oh, it's probably his brother, Mark. I was like, oh, okay, I don't feel so bad now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This has been so much fun, Wally. I thank you for taking so much of your time to do this today.
No problem. It was fun. It was fun recalling it. I was really happy to do it because I do a lot of podcasts, but not Letterman was such a such a cool thing in my life, and it made me rethink about all the stories and my experiences there. So thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, that means the world to me. Just hang tight here for a second. We'll say our goodbye privately. I'm just going to do a quick outro if that's okay.
Okay, got it.
All right, cool. Well, there we go. That's why we do this show. I'm a broken record for these outros here, but that's why we do the show. I mean, we pick up the little rocks, the stones that have not been turned over, and we try and turn them over to find out the inner workings of what we consider to be the greatest body of broadcasting work in history, that of David Letterman and company. The Letterman podcast has one sponsor only, and that is Rupert G. Now, he no longer has the Hello Deli, but he still has hello-deli.com. Go to hello-deli.com, the only place that you can buy official Late Show with David Letterman merchandise. Rupert is just a hell of a guy, and we just appreciate him so much. hello-deli.com, the only sponsor of the Letterman podcast. Cue cards by Wally. Go there if you want to get a customized cue card. What a great gift. What a great thing that would be. I love having this one. Ty Rogers, shout out to him for sending this one to me. And what a cool gift if you're thinking about something for somebody for a special occasion of some sort. Yeah, this has been another episode of the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.